this final video on merger analysis, I'm going to give you an overview on non-horizontal mergers. We will begin with vertical mergers. Some of the topics that have already been approached in the previous video, such as the efficiencies defense or the failing firm defense, apply to non-horizontal mergers as well, so I will not develop them here. Currently, vertical mergers are seen as having less risks of anti-competitive effects. On the one hand, by involving firms that operate on different levels of the value chain, vertical mergers do not eliminate competition between the firms involved. On the other, by integrating those operations, vertical mergers are considered as more likely to bring about welfare benefits in terms of efficiency gains. This benign view is adopted by the European Commission Non-Horizontal Merger Guidelines of 2008. Therefore, the Commission argues for tolerance of vertical mergers where none of the firms involved has a market share above 30% on the respective market and where the market is unconcentrated or only moderately concentrated. Note, however, that this is not a legal presumption. The analysis of these mergers follows a similar methodology as that used for horizontal mergers. Thus, we need to consider both unilateral and non-coordinated effects. In practice, the analysis of vertical mergers is mainly focused on the risk of unilateral effects. These may be considered at two levels: the risk of anti-competitive foreclosure in one of the markets concerned, and the risk of conflicts of interest created by the vertical integration. As to the risk of anti-competitive foreclosure, the Commission's guidelines set out two scenarios. The first one, we find cases where the concentration may lead to competitors of the new vertically integrated firm being deprived of access to an input that they require in order to compete in the downstream market. In the second scenario, there is the risk of exclusion of competitors due to practices that benefit the production of the new vertically integrated firm. In this image, we can see a description of the first scenario, what the Commission calls input foreclosure. If the competitors in the downstream market are dependent on access to the input supplied by the new vertically integrated firm upstream, the latter may increase prices, apply discriminatory terms that favor its downstream unit, or limit supply to downstream competitors. The important question is to know if the concentration may lead to a reduction of the competitive pressure in the downstream market. Before reaching a conclusion, it is necessary to assess whether the concentration may lead to offsetting efficiency gains that might outweigh anti-competitive effects. Only then may we conclude on the overall impact of the concentration on consumers. In the customer foreclosure scenario, the new vertically integrated firm may block access by its competitors at an upstream market to a distribution channel downstream. In this case, upstream competitors would be foreclosed from accessing the downstream market. But the merger may also have an impact on competition in the downstream market. If the upstream competitors are foreclosed by the new vertically integrated firm, they will now face a more concentrated group of suppliers. If the upstream market becomes very concentrated, the remaining upstream suppliers may now have the ability and incentives to exercise market power, thus raising the costs for downstream competitors of the new vertically integrated firm. This means that downstream competitors have higher input costs, and that places them at a competitive disadvantage, enabling the new vertically integrated firm to raise prices in the downstream market. This is the raising rivals' costs effect. Just like in the input foreclosure scenario, we must also take into account whether possible efficiency gains may outweigh anti-competitive effects. The analysis of foreclosure is complex and demanding, and it requires a distinction between the ability to foreclose and the incentive to foreclose. The ability to foreclose is determined objectively in view of the characteristics of the affected markets and the degree of market power in those markets post-merger. On the other hand, The incentive to foreclose is derived from an assessment as to whether the new vertically integrated firm may be led to exercise such market power through anti-competitive foreclosure. As you will be aware by now, a foreclosure strategy is pursued through conduct that may well be illegal under Articles 101 and 102 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, such as tying, bundling, or exclusive purchasing requirements. So the Commission also assesses if those rules create a deterrent pressure that may dissuade the new vertically integrated firm from adopting a foreclosure strategy, even when it has the ability and incentive to do so. Then we have the risk of a conflict of interests. In this video, we're going to look at an adapted real case. When a firm partly controlled by Airbus acquired control of Arianespace, the Commission identified the risk of conflict of interests. Arianespace is a supplier of satellite launching services. It uses cargo and satellite launch adapters provided by Airbus, and it's the purchasing entity ALS. On the other side of the market, Airbus is one of the leading satellite producers. The Commission identified the risk that Arianespace would transmit to Airbus confidential information on competing satellite producers using its launching services. On the other hand, since Airbus and ALS supply cargo and launch adapters to other providers of satellite launch services, vertical integration could allow Arianespace to gain commercially sensitive information on its competitors. The operation was ultimately approved, but with remedies to address the risk of conflicts of interest. This led to subjecting approval to the condition that firewalls or Chinese walls would be erected to prevent the exchange of information between parent companies and Arianespace. Finally, vertical integration may increase the risk of coordinated effects by making it easier for firms to collude on one of the markets affected. This may occur where the merger increases the symmetry between vertically integrated competitors, or by increasing market transparency, as well as by leading to the elimination of a maverick firm that disrupted incumbents' ability to collude. The third and last type of concentration is conglomerate mergers. Conglomerate mergers involve markets that are not vertically related, although they are connected at some level. This could be the case of two methods of packaging fresh foods where one of them is not yet commercially viable. However, new technical innovations may lead both methods to become viable in the near future, leading to the two markets converging into a single market. Two firms operating in each of these markets may not be actual competitors today, and so the merger would not be a horizontal merger. But the prospect of market convergence may imply that they are potential competitors in the medium to long term. Since 2008, however, the Commission has downplayed these concerns, as you can see from this quote from the non-horizontal guidelines. The methodology of analysis of conglomerate mergers is similar to the one that applies to horizontal and vertical mergers, accounting for both unilateral and coordinated effects. Since in fact only the former raise practical competition law concerns, this video will only focus on them. The risk of unilateral effects arises from the risk that the new merged firm may foreclose one of the markets by leveraging market power in a primary market towards a secondary market. For that strategy to succeed, it is necessary that we are not dealing with a pure conglomerate, which is to say that there must be some relevant characteristic that links both markets for leveraging to be possible. To pursue leveraging strategies implies that the merger entity will likely resort to tying or bundling, which is to say conduct that ties access to a product where the firm has market power to the purchase of another product. Now, these practices are also prohibited by Article 102 of the treaty as abuses of dominance. The probability that the merger will lead to a leveraging effect therefore requires that we anticipate the effective ability of the merged firm to successfully adopt a leveraging strategy. This means that it is necessary that the merged firm has both the ability as well as the incentives to pursue such an exclusionary strategy. Last but not least, it is also necessary to evaluate the possible impact at the level of price, innovation, and choice. Conglomerate mergers will raise competitive concerns where a causal link can be established between the concentration, the leveraging effect, and a risk of anti-competitive market foreclosure. For the transaction to create a significant impediment to effective competition, exclusionary conduct must both be possible and economically rational due to the change in market conditions arising from the concentration. And this is what the General Court has stated in the Cisco Systems judgment quote that you have here on this image. We will now turn to the last topic of this video, commitments, or as they are commonly called, merger remedies. As we've seen in an earlier video, most mergers that are notified to the Commission are ultimately approved unconditionally, and only a very small number of transactions are prohibited, even when there are serious doubts as to their impact on effective competition in the single market. Many of the latter cases are solved by negotiating commitments. Commitments are proposed by the notifying party and may be accepted by the Commission. If accepted, commitments are made effective through a decision authorizing the merger, with conditions and obligations imposed on the notifying party to ensure that commitments will be complied with after approval is granted. Commitments may be accepted by the Commission on Phase 1 or on Phase 2 proceedings. It is up to the notifying party to propose commitments, which the Commission will then evaluate and conduct a market test to ensure that they are both feasible and address the Commission's competitive concerns. When presented in Phase 1, commitments must respond directly and adequately to the serious doubts raised by the Commission. In Phase 2, commitments must fully solve the problems identified by the Commission in this more thorough review and also be proportional. Now, commitments may be either behavioral or structural. As the name indicates, behavioral remedies involve conduct obligations on the side of the notifying party. Structural remedies require changes that have an impact on the structure of the market post-merger. Although structural remedies tend to be more apt to solve competition issues in the long run, both types of remedies raise monitoring issues as well as difficulties in guaranteeing their effectiveness. To conclude, we will look at an example of commitments. We will go back to the hypothetical scenario where we have 4 mobile phone operators. Firms Alpha and Beta are merging to form a new entity, Alpha Beta, and only 3 players will remain in the market, with each of them with 1/3 of the market. We can now think about what kind of remedies could solve the competition issues raised by this operation. To keep things simple, let's focus on the impact caused by the reduction of the market participants from 4 to 3. Because one of the most important barriers to entry in this market is the availability of scarce radio spectrum, a possible route worth exploring is the divestment of spectrum capacity held by the new entity, so that there is enough transmission capacity for a new player to enter the market. A note of caution, though, we are trying to compensate the negative effect on competition that we know for certain will occur, the reduction of the number of competitors, with the possibility of creating conditions for a new competitor to emerge. Divestiture of spectrum is therefore not enough. Competition problems will only be adequately resolved if entry by a new competitor is not only viable, but also highly likely. And with this, we come to the end of this video. So please read the Commission's non-horizontal merger guidelines, and I look forward to discuss the topic in class. So bye for now.